Vinland Saga, another highly requested one. Unlike Frieren, before watching this, I'm not sure why it's so highly requested. I can't imagine it's based off of its overwhelming quality alone. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure if it's being suggested, then it's obviously well-liked. But I don't think it's ever broken through the glass dome of anime hype and gotten mainstream hype. Or if it has, I at least haven't heard very much about it at all. I'll tell you though, before sitting down to watch the first 12 episodes of this one, the amount of episodes the first opening covers, I have seen maybe the middle 10 minutes of episode 1 or 2, I think. Because one of my friends was trying to get into it, and I said, alright, I'll sit here and watch it. I don't remember not liking it, but I suppose I didn't see the need to pursue it on my own either. Let's see if 12 can convince me more than half of 1 did. Subbed or dubbed? Always the bridesmaid subbed. Alright, 12 episodes later, I mean, so far, it's alright. Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's not what I was expecting going in. I do this weird thing where I train myself to recognize anime openings just by the song. I don't know why. A friend and I discovered anime opening quizzes a while back when we had nothing to do and have gotten to be pretty decent at them since. Well, here's an example. What anime opening is this just from hearing the song for a few seconds? If you said Bench Sasuke, which is the impromptu name we coined for when the actual title of Noragami is on the tip of your tongue but you can't remember it, you'd be correct. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, it plays into why Vinland Saga isn't what I was expecting. From those weird anime opening quizzes, you only ever really hear or maybe see 10 seconds of an anime opening when the answer is revealed. So the 10 seconds of Vinland Saga I was always shown was this shot, where it's Ascalad standing proudly and then a big sweeping pan to Thorfinn, and if you're lucky you get all the way to the shot of him running when he was a kid. These shots, combined with the very low-key attitude of the show in the 10 minutes I had watched prior, which I discovered was in episode 1, led me to believe that this show would be basically completely grounded, which would be a blade that cuts both ways, I thought. Now, I'm aware that there are animes that are basically completely grounded, slice-of-life shows about the mundane lives of everyday people, I know that, but from my admittedly limited viewpoint, those shows will certainly still have more over-the-top anime moments and execution from time to time. At least it's easy to assume that. And in my head, I thought that maybe the brutal life of a Norse Viking could be the setting where that more extreme expressionism could actually be dialed back more, and it could result in basically an animated show that didn't treat itself much like an animated show. And I know what some of you are thinking, this dude hates anime so much that he just wants it to be live action basically, but no, those were just my thoughts about what the feeling of the show would be going in. While I think that could be an interesting approach to an animated show, in theory, I don't think it's something I'm actively looking for, if I'm being honest, because the other way that blade cuts is that if you're gonna have an animated show, why would you not take advantage of all the things that animation can do? I thought that might be an interesting thing to talk about, honestly. And I think the final thing that really tricked me into thinking that this show would go in that direction is the animation, or I suppose really the art style, the really harsh, sharp features and mostly realistic anatomy. The art direction, I thought at a glance, sort of lended itself to be in a more realistic setting. So all of these thoughts that I brought into the show were instantly ripped in half along with these two guys on the mast of this ship within 60 seconds of starting. I was like, oh, never mind. And that's not a bad thing, mind you, not necessarily. You have to take a show for what it gives you, not for what you want it to be. It was just a bit of a shock. So let's actually get into what the show actually is rather than what I expected it to be. What really stuck out in my head when I sat down to write this script is that it's a very strange angle to tell a story from. You would naturally say that Thorfinn is our main character, as we follow him in his early childhood and advance rather quickly up until he's a hardened 16-year-old or so. But when you really look at it, for these first 12 episodes, I don't think he really is the main character. He gets a lot of screen time and gets to look cool a lot, but really only 1 or 2 episodes really revolve around him or his struggles. For the first 4 or 5 episodes, the show centers around his father, Thors, who was so tough he took an arrow to the shoulder and then decided he wasn't wounded.
You're hit. You're bleeding, man.
I ain't got time to bleed.
And when Thors is killed, you'd think that the mantle of main character would quickly pass on to the kid that is highlighted so heavily in the opening, but it really doesn't. The main character of this show, if you ask me, so far is Ascalad. Most episodes center around him and his men and his campaigns. He's the character that we see the most character from, learn the most about, and learn the most about the world through. We see many episodes and conflicts from his point of view, most of the time, once the time skip is through. Thorfinn's only real role in the episodes is to glower, speak gruffly, and run in with the daggers for an action scene. And I don't mean to say that this will be the norm for the entire series. I've only watched 12 episodes, but from what I've seen, this really is Ascalad's show more than Thorfinn's. Thorfinn has the story and motivation of a main character, and I think the show is trying to show us that over all of this time, years and years of Thorfinn being under his father's killer's command, that while yes, the current task at hand is what's being focused on, there's always that thought in the background, that secondary thought that Thorfinn is going to kill this guy and take revenge. Thorfinn doesn't care about all these warring countries that he ends up fighting for or against or raiding raiding coastal towns and taking their women and money and lives. He's just there that so one day he can get a shot at Ascalad. I think on that level it's kind of well executed. Thorfinn is going along with all of this as he quietly seethes and trains and prepares for what actually matters to him. He's not the acting character that the show revolves around right now because he's simply not strong enough to be that character. And I'm sure that moment will come where he is and the show shifts to be more from his perspective. But right now it's a show about a pirate Viking guy who runs a troop of horrible villainous cunts who pillage and burn towns and take pay from the highest bidder to kill for them, which leaves me in a state of not really being able to root for anyone in this show. Thorfinn killing Ascalad would be something a viewer could be like, alright, I'm on board for, but in the meantime, Thorfinn kills and takes part in horrible raids for years and years. I'm not really rooting for anyone in this show. There aren't really any good guys. It's a show about horrible people doing horrible stuff to other horrible people. And that's another bit of expectations I brought into the show that were shattered. The show's called Vinland Saga, yeah? And Vinland is built up as this Shangri-La far away across the ocean. I sort of thought that this show was going to be about maybe going there, adventuring and settling in a new land. But no, it mostly seems to be about piracy and history. This show's full of surprises. Maybe it's for the best. If they were going to sail across the ocean and find Newfoundland, I would have been pissed that I already burned calling Edward and Alphonse Debise. Let's talk more about Thorfinn, because he certainly will be a bigger player moving forward, but for the majority of this run, I really did find him pretty hard to read. He starts out as this pretty unremarkable kid. He sucks at fighting, has a streak of over-seriousness, cries all the time. He's just a kid. Your normal, run-of-the-mill kid. But then he sees his legendary fighter of a father killed by subterfuge and is drawn into the cycle of violence, vowing revenge despite his age and obvious weakness. And that, of course, has the makings of a character identity that's hard to get sick of. If you're alive in current day and have access to media from the last 80 years, you're well aware of how easy it is to get into a revenge story. How easy it is to side with a character that has had wrong done to them and is fueled to even the score. Because fuck you! You killed someone I love or took something precious from me. You crossed me in some unforgivable, irredeemable way. I don't care how long it takes, I'm gonna get you. Everyone can get behind that. It's endlessly interesting and we will continue to see it forever because it's a character motivation that no matter if something similar has happened to you or not, you agree with this character wholeheartedly. You are on their side. They're right. You will be just as motivated as they are. So we're in, right? Thorfinn will rise to avenge his father through struggle and hardship across the show. Even, interestingly, taking a different path from his father, not being the biggest and strongest, but being quick and wiry and intelligent instead, showing that he's his own warrior. He doesn't do it like everyone else. And while that may actually be the overall trajectory of the show moving forward, I'm not sure, that was not the story of these first 12 episodes. Like I mentioned, the first 4 belong to his father, Thor's. The next 2 are about him getting his bearings and his new life, which are the episodes that center around him the most. But then for the remaining 6 episodes, Thorfinn is scarcely in the show as a character. He's mostly just 2 knives tied to a body, either listening to orders to fight or threatening to kill Ascalad. But the moments that Thorfinn does actually have, where he's more than that, are really interesting, actually. It's clear that this life has taken him over. He's more like the men in Ascalad's forces than he is like his father, and it's not even close. Despite only being among these men so he can avenge his father in an honor duel because that's what he thinks his father would do. But in reality, his father was a pretty solid example of healthy masculinity. Gentle and kind, loving, though he did have trouble expressing it. Strong, able to defend himself and his loved ones, but only when they were threatened. He never went looking for a fight, unless his hand was forced, of course, like it was. With his father's guiding hand, Thorfinn surely would have grown up to have these admirable qualities as well. But his childhood was one surrounded with horrible people, and whether he likes it or not, a mixture of their influence and Thorfinn's undying need for revenge has forged him into someone that his father would probably be very disappointed in. He knows this even, as he has a dream where his father comes to visit his younger self and they talk about how everything he's doing isn't worth it, pointless even, and he should be where he's actually needed, back home, using his strength like a real man should, protecting the ones he loves rather than punishing himself and fighting for a ghost. Thorfinn's thoughts on violence, though, and the little tidbits we get to see from him really are interesting bits. When he was treated like family by this nice Christian family, a family with a different religion that comes from a different place, he appreciated their kind efforts and tried to repay them by warning them to leave, since his people were about to come and ransack the place, and he was the one that was going to give the signal to do it. And yes, he is frustrated that they didn't listen to him, but he still barely bats an eye when this motherly old woman who fed him and healed him is horribly killed by the men in his group. He yawns afterwards. This is nothing to him. He's completely entrenched in it, and will be until the events of the later half of the season when he's around 16. So for over a decade, this is all he knows. And it's pretty reasonable that a person with that life experience, all off the back of your father being killed in front of you, would seclude themselves and fall into quietness or antisocialness. And that beat is why I don't find the distance the anime has shown Thorfinn to have is all that bad, at least not yet. I think if it persists for too long, then it'll become an issue, because our main character can't just be this grumbling dude that just fights people for the entire show. And I don't think he will be. There is another small small beat at the end of an episode where Thorfinn thinks to himself that everyone around him is insane. They all take pleasure in killing, which, yeah, is pretty nuts. You even have Thorkel later on, who is purposely the opposite of Thorfinn. Big and relies on his strength, loves using that strength to kill, apparently unlike Thorfinn. Which tells us that though Thorfinn has killed who knows how many people, all of them for the man that killed his father, he hasn't fallen into the trapping of killing just for killing's sake. All of this, I'm sure to him, with some screwed up logic, is to meet the end goal of survive and become strong enough to kill Ascalad. But a question I'm asking, and I'm hoping he will have to ask himself, is that if all of these men are crazy for enjoying their carnage, will he be as bad as them when he finally does kill Ascalad? No matter how much he hates the idea of killing now, when it comes down to the one he wants to kill, would he not get some level of, I don't want to say joy out of it, but some level of positive release from it, right? He's been at it for over 10 years now, over 2/3 of his life with the single-minded goal of fuck this guy up. How can you not enjoy killing the man that killed your father when you've been at it for probably as long as you can remember? That is, I suppose, only if their relationship stays the way that it is. Maybe I should mention the opening first before I get into this point. Okay, so the opening. I get why all those anime quizzes use that 10 seconds, because it is the most notable bit of the song for sure, and the bit I like the most. I like the first 3/4 of it or so quite a bit. I think all of the shots of the battle and the rowing goes really well with the heavy drums to really get the song revving, and then the pretty cool big sweeping shots to go along with the longer notes of the high vocals. I think it all comes together pretty nicely. Once it gets into the screaming part though, I'd probably leave that part out. I'm not much into Japanese screamo unless it's about Frieza or whatever a bikini sports ponchon is. I also have this really psychotic thing that I noticed, and if it's on purpose, it's fucking crazy, but whatever, you want to hear it? Okay, so some people think that having screen motion go from left to right feels or looks better. A lot of the time characters you're supposed to root for are framed moving left to right, or looking from screen left to right. I don't know, a lot of people say it has something to do with the human brain. There's a subconscious feeling of the movement being forward or positive. I don't know, I'm not a doctor or even a cinematographer, but what I noticed that in this opening, in nearly every shot, the characters you're supposed to be rooting for are actually facing or moving to screen left. Enough for me to notice it, and I thought, weird, why is that? And I think it could be, I know it sounds dumb, but it could be because Vinland is to the west. They're all facing or moving that way because that's where they want to go subconsciously. They want to go to paradise and live an easy life. Okay, I know that's really dumb. I'm just saying, same shot here, Ascalad and his men are moving to the right, but then we spin around to Thorfinn and he's moving left. I'm just saying. Anyway, I also think this opening spoiled the show for me, you know what I mean? Before Thors dies, there's all the ingredients you need to really put together the dynamic of the main characters. Because this running kid is Big Guy's son, clearly, and then running kid becomes furious hardened teenager for some reason, and he's on blonde guy's boat despite looking unpleased about it, and then him and blonde guy are fighting in a public duel, so all of that information was there for me to conclude that, like, by episode 3, I want to say that, okay, Thors will be killed by Ascalad, probably due to some trick because he looks slimy, and then Thorfinn will begrudgingly join up with him and apprentice under him or something while he's still trying to kill him here and there because Ascalad killed his dad. And I was pretty close, I want to say. Which brings us back around to Thorfinn and Ascalad. I was expecting more of a begrudging tutorship between them, strangely. I know the idea of learning combat or really anything from the man that had your father looking like this would be totally out of the question for Thorfinn or probably anyone, but it does seem like there may be some level of tutelage going on just as this run of episodes closes out. Ascalad tries to share some strange wisdom with Thorfinn about how people are here now, kings rise, but in the end, the world just keeps spinning. It doesn't matter who wins and loses, who's in power now is only in power until someone else is. We're all just here trying to make the most out of our time, and the world is going to end someday anyway. And I guess that's all true to an extent, and maybe it was just the character musing to themselves out loud, but I'm not really sure how it applies to anything that's going on at this point. But it certainly was a scene where Ascalad tried to have some kind of meaningful conversation with Thorfinn. He was trying to do or say something. He relates their feud to the rise and fall of nations and kings. He figures Thorfinn will beat him eventually, because that's just how it goes. Everyone, everything dies eventually. Thorfinn is of course not open to any small talk or wisdom from the guy who orchestrated his father's killing, so it's a pretty one-sided conversation, but the conversation having happened is probably still important. Despite the hatred there, Ascalad mostly has never felt a mutual hatred. As far as I can tell, Ascalad just doesn't think much of Thorfinn at all. Multiple times he assumes he's dead and just says, oh well, moving on. There's no kinship from either side, but from how stories are told, I just get a feeling that there will be on some level by the end. Like when Thorfinn does kill him, maybe he doesn't get the joy out of it that he's even expecting at that point, because he spent so much time around the man. What I'm pretty sure about is that Thorfinn will likely go on the same emotional journey that his father has seemed to, though we haven't seen much of it. Becoming strong, maybe the strongest of all, and realizing that the violence he can wreak, no matter how good he becomes at it, no matter how motivated and justified he feels in doing it, at the end of the day, it just isn't worth it. And I think pairing him with this prince that looks like he will explode if anyone steps close to him will be a good way of having him realize that life isn't just this hardship he's become accustomed to. If the story goes the way I'm picturing, they will likely travel together for a time, and Thorfinn will teach the prince to toughen up a bit, and the prince will remind Thorfinn that being this mumbling killing machine isn't all there is to life. But I've been wrong many times before. It could be that Thorfinn gets riddled with arrows, just like Pops, and then the show becomes a political thriller starring Canute. Fuck, I don't know. Wow, that was a lot of talking about characters. It really ate up most of the video. Damn. I have a few more points to make though as well. Well, if you look at my notes, I guess I have like 500 micro points to make, but if we did that, we'd just be reading my script of on-the-fly reactions, and then there'd be no script writing day in my work week, so where's the fun in that? So let's touch on the big ones. Outside of Thorfinn and Ascalad, I don't really care what the hell is happening in this show, really at all. I like the idea of the show taking place in a mock version of actual history. Settings being actual historical battles and places are fun, and I can't say how accurate or inaccurate they are. If Robert the Bruce shows up at some point, then we can talk. He may be dead or not have been born for 200 years in either direction in the show. I wouldn't know. That's how much of a history buff I am. But yeah, the random conflicts at random historical places don't really do much for me, I'm afraid. Like, I like it in theory, but the show doesn't really do much with it. I don't find what little overarching background stories, like with the king or the Jom's Vikings, to be all that interesting at all at this point either. I was kind of annoyed with the action early on too, because the world overall is sort of grounded, not as much as I was thinking, but I think more grounded than this action would lend itself to. But when I thought about it more, I sort of hacked my brain into thinking about it in a different way. Basically, each conflict the show shows us, the big battles between armies, the armies don't really matter. Each army or battalion is really just represented by one character acting for them, and that larger-than-life fight where a guy can throw trees at you to smash your boats, or a guy can disappear and reappear because he's so fast, those more intimate, more anime-style battles between the two champions of the opposing sides are the bigger battles reduced down to a fight we can watch and understand more clearly. Whoever wins the anime battle also wins the actual overall battle, so they're sort of representations of the conflict, who can also clearly have personal stories and stakes tied up in the actual physical altercation too, which I think is a pretty cool way to do it, as long as you can trick your brain into thinking like that, because really all of our other conflicts are only ever resolved by one tricky play by one side or the other. There aren't any real battle tactics on display, which I guess the show isn't going for, but I think it could have been a cool addition if this sort of historical drama did go into that stuff at least a little bit. It's also nice that the really solid art style isn't lost in the animation. The animation looks really high quality nearly all the time. I can only think of a shot or two here and there that doesn't look great, much less than your average anime. The action is almost always a fun watch, though I do think this brutal way of life and realism does clash pretty hard with the anime super strength and stuff. I welcome you to think differently. I just don't think the two mesh very well. Speaking of unbelievability, could you imagine having to walk a straight line all the way across Wales? How unrealistic. I guess to close this one out, I have to say I'm not in love with this show yet, but whoever is really in love with the show after 12 20-minute episodes, I guess. I think it's alright, but it almost feels like these 12 episodes were only the setup for the actual show, maybe. There's been no real solid footing for an ongoing story with or about our main characters. The stories have been about world conflicts that characters take part in, but the show hasn't told the characters' stories yet. It feels like it may have set them up, but it hasn't done it yet, is what I'm trying to say. The closest to actually doing it is Thorfinn, but as things sit, he's understandable, certainly, but not a character I can think of and say, wow, what an interesting one, because despite his understandability, we haven't seen any range out of him since he was 8 with that woman who treated him nicely. 12 episodes isn't a ton of time, but it's also not a short amount of time either, and I don't know if this show really accomplished as much as it could have with it. My hopes for this show is that now the world is set up and our characters seem to be in a situation that isn't strictly just a battle or a raid, and we're around some new characters, the story can attack what and who these characters are now and ask them if that's all they are, or if they can be more to themselves and the people around them before they all kill each other. Patreon shoutouts. If you want to see a brand new video from me ahead of YouTube release, you can support me on Patreon for just a few bucks. Link, as always, is in the description below the video. Link, as always, in the... What the fuck? Oh, man, I fucked this script up. Biggest shoutouts of all go to my top patrons, A Flock of Plain Cakes, who was stalked for months by The Association, and just the other day was given a $50,000 check for most stylish grocery runs. A2AX Phoenix, who has labfuls of people studying and testing every day on a way to actually harm them. Dropping a steamroller on them didn't work, so they're kind of at a loss. Anthony Collins, whose time machine they built as a kid did actually work, unbeknownst to them, only very, very slowly. Insomnite, who was actually an alien that's just chilling out on Earth until the next time Halley's Comet comes around. Creffin, who was cryogenically frozen for years, but then they got tired of it and just kind of got out of the tank. Now they always think it's too warm. Midnight Balsams, who can clap so fast they can ignite the atmosphere and kill every living thing within a mile. And Tater of Tots, who stopped what would be the largest sailboat collision pileup since 2003 by spending that one rogue wave generation he was granted by that genie. Some people say not a great great first wish, but listen, man, if you got infinite money, you really got no money, so. And of course, my other fuck you money patrons, Blanco, Kevin Bartlin, Potato Scream, Saint Expedite, Sam Mudatong, The Formal Meaning of Life, The 1am Party, Trendkill, and Whitrow. And my god overanalyzers, Two Boots Are Beat, Ang, Blade Dancer, Buniverse, Cosmic Numi, Danny Stevens, Dr. Xerox, Dominic Saint, Emma, Jackson, Jeremy Rubenstein, John Warhammer, Kirill Magnus, Mac, Marshall Rather, Matthew Lang, Michael Fallon, Mitchell Gobrecht, Nick, Nicholas Abbott, Peter Bandera, Peter Bayron, Philip Jindra, Pogger White, Rocket Mist, Ryan Maxwell, Scoobert, Shane Antonacci, Smarty Marty, Princess Useless Backwards, Super Snipper, That Blind Ginger, and some sort of bear face. I don't know what it is, man. Fuck. Next up, Finnish FMA, maybe? We'll see. Maybe I'll tease that one for a bit.